right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Scripting Thursday. I'm going to go ahead and let a couple people in and then share my screen, and we'll get started. We are continuing today with the listing presentation and how to get paid. So hang on here. All right. So, if you haven't met me before, my name's Laine. I'm a broker here in Seattle, Washington. I've been doing this since the 80s. So a lot of experience, a lot of success, a lot of failures too. So I'm happy to share my failures in the hopes of helping you avoid your own. So we have been talking about the listing presentation sequence now. This is week 4, I think. Week 4. And we're going to talk about commissions and how to talk about them, etc. So this should be a good one. But what if you could give information to a seller and help them feel happiness about paying you, right? It's always kind of a little bit of an awkward conversation, especially if you're not comfortable talking about them. But what if I could give you a way that made them feel happy about it? That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? I think so. Right? You got to remember the sequence of events, right? So we met them at their home. We toured the home. We set our laptop down next to the kitchen table. And then when we get done with the tour, we come back and we give them our listing presentation, right? And then at the end of our presentation, you actually want to ask them, did you notice anything different? Or did anything stand out to you? There's 2 ways to say that, right? And in our slide deck, there's actually a screen that has a list of all of the things that we do so that they don't have to just memorize what you just told them. They can just look at the list and go, oh, yeah, I really like this or that. A really common comment that I get is, yeah, it's just so comprehensive. Or, yeah, you guys think of everything. Like that's the impression you want to drive, right? And then we follow that up with, am I the right guy or am I the right gal to help you get your home sold? And if they say yes, extend your right hand and shake their hand and say, I'm happy to be working with you, right? If they say anything other than yes, that's an objection. And we covered a lot of the objections last week. But we're going to really drill in today on the commission topic, which can come as an objection, right? So if I say, am I the right guy to help you get your home sold? They could say, well, it depends on what you're going to charge me, right? If they say yes, though, go to the folder. Start filling out the paperwork. Get them to hire you, okay? And really focus on not giving your value of their home until they've signed the listing agreement, until they've hired you, right? Because the sad reality is a lot of sellers are really ultimately all they're doing is asking that question of 5 or 6 or 25 agents and hiring the person who gives the highest number. And you really want them to separate what the agent tells you from who's got the best marketing system, right? So a dialogue that I use for that purpose is, well, gosh, it's your, like, this would be an answer to what that depends. What are you going to list it for? Right. And I'd say, well, gosh, it's your asset. In the end, it's going to be your decision on what to list it for. I'm going to certainly give you my advice and opinion, but in the end, it's your call. But really what you're trying to determine is who's got the best marketing system. Who's going to drive the most traffic through your house to get you the most amount of money, right? And based on what I've shown you, is that me? And they'll say yes if your listing presentation is compelling, right? Now, what about NAR, right? So I'm in the state of Washington. And as you guys all know, the NAR settlement was all about the decoupling of commissions, where a listing broker negotiates with the seller for both buyer and seller commissions. And so that's all been reframed, right? Now in a lot of states, they call it concessions. Can't even call it commissions. In a lot of states, you can't market it, right? So we can't have a conversation about commissions under the listing presentation without addressing NAR. So I'm going to tell you what our situation is here in Washington, and yours is probably different because Washington is pretty unique. Our MLS actually made a decision at the beginning of this year that they weren't going to participate in the settlement. They weren't going to comply, meaning they weren't going to remove information from the listings that benefits the buyer. And if we're all really honest about it, it kind of is a screw job for the buyer to no longer allow sellers to promote and market a commission, right? Doesn't mean buyer agents can't get one, but to not, to basically force a negotiation where it was working just fine before, and the buyer had full awareness and disclosure of what was going on. To take that backwards is not a great idea. But anyway, the way we're left here in Washington, and I'm in Seattle, is our MLS still shows the commissions for the buyer's brokerage, which is pretty cool because that, the main thing that the omission of that does is not cut down, but increase the phone calls, right? Because a buyer's agent's going to have to call you and say, is your seller planning to or prepared to offer some sort of concession? So we get to still show them, and you just have to make sure that you're navigating your state and your firm's policies correctly so that you don't get in trouble, right? How about if you'd meet with a seller who says, hey, I saw in the news I don't have to pay this anymore, right? Has anyone heard that? Show of hands, has anyone heard that? Oh, I hate this new Zoom format. Anyway,
yes.
So if a seller says, I heard I don't have to pay that, here's the dialogue. You never had to pay. Whoever told you you had to pay, they were lying to you. That's it. Isn't it kind of funny that there's a whole class action lawsuit around something that never was true? Now, it was true in Missouri. They had a state law that said that. That's why that lawsuit got filed in Missouri. But we never told a seller they had to. We told them it was prudent or smart, right? So we're going to get into the dialogue that you can use to help a seller realize that they don't want to injure their own efforts to get their home sold, okay? All right, so how can you make a seller feel happy for paying you? Well, you kind of have to think about what's their frame of mind when they sat down with you in the first place, right? Especially if you're going through a pretty comprehensive listing presentation, they're thinking the whole time, man, I hope he'll do this for 4%. Or man, I hope she'll do this for 4%, right? So if they're saying, I hope he'll do this for 4%, wouldn't a response like, I'll do it for 3 be a benefit? And physiologically and psychologically, it actually will release endorphins in their brain when they're hoping for the number 4 and you say the number 3 or 2.5 or whatever you are planning to charge for your portion on the listing side only, right? So quote your fee by itself. So let's just, for the sake of this conversation, let's say it's 3%, right? So they say, am I the right guy to help get your home sold? And they say, it depends what you're going to charge me. I say, Well, you get all of that, everything I just showed you, for 3%. And then I shut up because I want the endorphins to get released into their brain because they just heard good news. Now, have I said 4%? Absolutely. I've signed lots of 7% total commission listing agreements. I may never again, because the buyer's agent fee may not be 3% any longer in a lot of places. We'll have to see. But there's always been that downward pressure on commissions, right? Remember, price is only an issue in the absence of value. So if you provide enough value, you can charge whatever you want. So you have to decide, what are you worth? But for this conversation, let's assume I said 3, right? And then I pregnant pause to let the endorphin rush kick in. And they're looking at you and you're looking at them. And then once that pause is over with, I say, now we just need to figure out what to offer a buyer's broker. And that's when it hits them that it's not just 3%. There's probably more, right? Now, there's a few ways I'm going to stop sharing so I can look at y'all. There's a few ways to couch this, right? The seller wants to pay as little as possible. Is that a fair statement, right? If you've shown an extensive list of activities that you're going to do, hopefully your 3% is justified. But now, how do we talk about a buyer's brokerage commission? And this is true in all states, whether you're allowed to disclose or not, you can have this same conversation. And I like to say it like this. My job is to help you pay as little as necessary for a buyer's broker. And the best way to do that is to survey the market and see what other sellers are offering. Because here's the key. You just don't want to stand out, right? We don't want to offer an amount that stands out, either on the high side or the low side, right? Because if it stands out on the high side, you're paying too much. And if it stands out on the low side, you run the risk of having agents who won't show your house. And that's still very real. You know, it's getting harder because the consumer has the MLS in their pocket these days. But there's definitely still brokers that filter listings based on commissions. So you can say that with conviction, right? So we don't want to stand on the high side because we're paying too much. And we don't want to stand out on the low side because then there will be agents. I don't say could be. I say there will be agents that won't show your house because they feel you're being cheap or you're offering too little. Does that make sense? And Rima, I saw your chat briefly. My job is to help you figure out how much to offer to a buyer's broker. But really, we want to just blend in. You know, sometimes I'll say this especially if I'm talking to a man, and you know, you talk to people and you get a sense if they're into sports or not. If I'm talking to a man and I think he's into sports, I'll actually use the NBA referee analogy, which I know is obscure, but it works great with people like that, right? Because I'll say, you know, we kind of want to be like an NBA referee. The perfect NBA referee is the one that you never notice, right? He only calls the fouls that actually happen. He doesn't make a scene of himself. I don't say those last bits. I just say he's the referee that you never notice, and they know what that means, right? So that's kind of the philosophy you want to bring to a buyer's brokerage concession or commission is we want to blend in with the pack. And how do you do that? Well, in our state, because we still disclose them, it's easy enough for me to do. I did one last night. I've got a listing going on this week, and I told the seller these exact words, and he said, sounds great. Let me know what you find out. And I did a radius search around his house and found 19 listings, either closed sales or currently actives, just total number of listings and 11 of the 19 were offering 2.5. So I went back to them and I said, hey, I did that survey that I told you I was going to do. And the good news is, I literally put the words good news in the email. I said, the good news is we only have to offer 2.5 to accomplish that goal of blending in. And he was like, sweet. Because he didn't, he was prepared to pay whatever I recommended. And it really was good news that it was less. So you can truly tee up people's expectations in a way that helps them feel like I'm not overspending, right? That's the goal for sellers. Frankly, that's the goal for buyers too. We'll be talking about buyer dialogues, and we always want to say we never want you to overpay for a house, right? So that's the way to kind of segue from what you charge into what you're going to recommend that they offer to a buyer's broker. Now, if you're in a market where they are not selling office commissions, you can just go back in time and say, well, I did an analysis of year to date, right? So I've figured out that over these last 6 months or since the first of the year, the average was X. So just use data to help people, because that's always going to be more compelling than just your opinion, right? All right, let me dive back in. I hate Zoom sometimes, It can't just leave well enough alone, right? So you've let the endorphin rush happen, then you've inoculated them to offering a buyer's broker commission. You also, in the moment when they're signing that, I leave it blank, right? Because I want to be genuine when I say we're going to do a survey. I'm going to do research. Now, could I have done that research before I got there? Absolutely. So if you'd rather do it ahead of time so that when you're sitting with them, you can produce it, by all means, you can do that. But I like to get hired first before I spend a lot of time on stuff, right? I'll give you a great example. When I go to a listing presentation from the previous weeks, you heard me say, I do a CMA. I go prepared to deliver a CMA. If they don't hire me, I don't tell them I've got the CMA with me. I actually pivot to a 2-step. And I'll say, here's an example. At the end of my presentation, I go, am I the right guy to help you get your home sold? And they say, it sure looks like it, but we've got 2 more interviews that we didn't know about, or that we hadn't scheduled when we agreed to meet with you, right? Because remember, when I book an appointment with a seller, I book the appointment, and then I ask 2 qualifying questions after I book the appointment. First qualifying question is, do you own this home by yourself or with someone else? And are they going to be there? Because I want all decision makers there, right? And number 2 is, are you going to interview any other agents? Because if they are, I'm going to unbook my appointment and I'm going to tell them I want to go last. And I have friends that insist on going first. I actually insist on going last, because I have dialogues that I will use to make sure that you don't sign something with someone else before we get a chance to meet, right? So let's just play that out so you guys can hear those words. So if I say, now, are you going to interview any other agents, and have you already scheduled them? Well, yeah, we're meeting you on Wednesday and we've got 2 others, one on Thursday, one on Fridays. I go, okay, well, my preference actually is to go last. So why don't we move our meeting from Wednesday to what should we say, Saturday? Would that work for you? And people will agree to that. They are wondering why you care to go last, right? But they'll agree to that. And then I say these magic words. Now, can you do me a favor? I'm going to do a lot of work in preparation for our meeting. Can you please not sign anything before we get a chance to meet? And then once we've met, you can hire whomever. I'm obviously not saying that. I'm just saying don't sign anything until we meet. Otherwise, that will have been an absolute waste of my time. And when you get somebody to say yes to that, they're 99% more likely to not sign somebody, even if they meet with someone like Alex, who's a closer and he's going to close hard, right? But that reduces that, because then they feel guilty if they do that, even though they, despite telling me, don't worry, I won't, right? So be prepared to unbook an appointment and move it, and then use those words. I'll say them one more time. Can you do me one favor before we meet on Saturday? Can you just commit to not signing anything with someone else before we get the chance to meet? Once we've met, you can sign with anybody, but if you could hold off, because I'm going to do a lot of work in preparation for our meeting, and I don't want that to be a waste of time. That's it. All right. All right. So let me go back in here. Wow. All right. I think I've been over this slide enough times, right? What if they balk? What? If they balk at the commissions, remember the objection slayer matrix we went over last week. You can frame it as a discount. My normal fee is $4, and I'm giving it to you for $3. That would be something I would say to somebody who says something to the effect of, well, I always get a discount. What's yours? Well, I'm already giving you one. What? Yeah, I quoted you 3%. My normal fee is $4. But I could tell you were a shrewd negotiator, so I gave you the discount right out of the gates. And now I'm signing you to a 3%er, right? So shoot a picture of this screen. If you didn't get it last week, you're going to be able to use these even sequentially, right? Like if I'm in a negotiation with somebody over my fee, I'll use pretty much everything on this list right here, and I'll try and wear you down. Because negotiations, have you guys ever noticed negotiation oftentimes is a war of attrition, right? I'm going to stop sharing again. I like looking at you guys. I hope you don't mind. They say, I want it for X, and you say, I want it for Y. And they say, well, I'll do X plus 2. And you say, well, I'll only do Y minus 2, X plus 5, Y minus 5. You go back and forth, right? At some point, one of the sides just says yes, because they're tired of it, right? And that's true in this case too. So if you have those rebuttals to, I want a discount, they will get to where they will stop asking. And it's like I've told a lot of agents, especially Chinese agents, and this is not cultural. Well, it is a cultural thing, right? A lot of Chinese buyers expect a discount or a rebate, and that's because a lot of Chinese brokers have taught them to expect that. And so I invested a lot of time because we had over 30 Mandarin-speaking brokers on my team at one time. And I just coached them up on these techniques so that they could discount less, right? They wouldn't necessarily, that's right, Suma, the Indian culture also looks for it as well. They wouldn't necessarily not have to discount at all, but 50% became 30, became 25, became whatever, right? So if you can use these dialogues to shrink how much you're having to discount, that's a win, right? All right. Okay. So last point I'll make, and then we'll open this up for conversation, is in the end, it's your business, right? We are all independent contractors. So if you have to give a discount to get the business, is that better than not having the business? Right? I've discounted. I've also gotten paid full price, a lot more than I've discounted, because I'm getting pretty good at these skills, and you will too, right? So it takes practice, right? And role play, talk to somebody on your team and say, hey, do you want to do a role play of the listing presentation, and I want you really to grind me on the commissions at the end so that you can practice, right? I always just say this about role playing. People hate role playing, right? In general. Here's why they hate it. You can role play with a stranger or a prospect, and they don't know what you're supposed to say, right? But if you role play with me or a peer that's studying and practicing these same techniques, they do know what you're supposed to say, and it's harder, right? That's why people don't like it. But man, think about that. Practicing with somebody who is an expert or is aspiring to be an expert, just like you are, is going to sharpen your saw a hell of a lot faster, right? Give you a quick analogy. I played water polo in college. My coach played for Stanford. Stanford was a 3-time national champion while he was there. So guess who he set up practice games against? Almost every week. It was killing me. We played against the reigning national champion 5 or 6 times a season because of his relationship with the head coach at that program. We got better faster. We went from unranked to being in the top 10 in the nation inside 3 years because of that. So seek out somebody that you really respect that's good at these things and role play with them because you'll get better faster. All right. I always like to finish this half hour with an open discussion about any questions or scripts maybe that you're running into or need right now or anything like that. So does anybody have a scenario where you didn't know what to say or you have it upcoming and you would like to know what to say? And if not, we can wrap up a little early. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful. Again, this is the 4th in a series. So if you missed the first ones, they're all hosted on the Agent Collective website. You can watch the previous ones. And feel free to email me if you ever want me to cover a specific topic or dialogue. I'll be happy to. All right.
If you'd like more information or to get connected to the Agent Power Huddle, join our free Facebook group. This call was designed for the agents in our EXP organization, but open to any agent from any brokerage. If you're a guest and you're interested in learning more about EXP or our specific resources within the Agent Collective, reach out to the person who invited you to this call to get more info. Produced by the Agent Collective Media Network.